Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Last week we did this. We did like a full fitting, two actually. We prepared the pattern for my trench coat and like made everything ready to start working on it with my actual fabric, with my fashion fabric, which is in the background right there. Yes, it's gonna be pink and I love it. So what we have to do is the tiring task of ironing interfacing onto 5 meters of fabric and then fusing 5 meters of fabric together, like the cotton and the suede, to make one fabric that we're gonna use for the trench coat. So that's something that I pushed and not wanted to do, but it is time to do it now. I already cut off the 5 meters that I need and started fusing, interfacing to my suede right here. It's only done for one side, so I have to do the other side as well, and then get started with the fusing, which is this material right here. It's a fusing material, it's called Bonder Web, and I hope I have enough. I actually don't know if I have enough. That's gonna be fun. So I might have to reorder some of this, but yeah, anyways, let's get started. I literally just burned through a cable, like I ironed through a cable, and then we had a blackout and it was like a big bang right here somewhere. I couldn't locate it. I was like shocked. And turned out that like there was a small explosion. Anyways, everything's working again. That was like a small heart attack that I had there, so let's continue working. Okay, so I finally managed to cut everything out. This took a whole day, but it's all cut out and really pretty. Let me just go over this to flatten it out. It was a hassle to fuse 5 meters times 1.4 meters together, but I think I did quite well. It looks pretty professional, so that's nice. Sometimes, I mean, this is just the facing, but sometimes I got like these folds, which, you know, I don't really care. It was such a hassle to do, but now I'm done. And now I'm gonna put some interfacing on top of the pink pieces that needed on top of, you know, the general stuff that I put in between. There is already interfacing in the middle of this, and then the fusing material, and then the two fabrics. So this is already super strong, so we don't really need to interface that much. Like usually I would do interfacing for the upper part of the sleeve, like the sleeve cap, and then the hem, and you know, the full front and stuff like that. I'm not gonna do that because it's already in here. If you do this without like this whole fusing mess that I chose, you should and need to put interfacing onto all of these specific pieces that's stated on the pattern, like for example the facing of the rain guard, or the actual like the shell of the rain guard and stuff, the collar and so on. So I'm just gonna put interfacing onto the neck and the armhole, and I think I'm gonna fully interface the collars because it just needs a lot of strength and stuff. So you never go wrong with putting interfacing on the collar pieces or the pocket or whatnot. So that's what I'm gonna do here as well. And also, obviously, everything will be covered up here, so I'm not gonna put any interfacing on pieces that show. This will be sewn together with the shell of the rain guard in this case, so with this piece right here, so nothing will be visible of the interfacing or the interfacing tape or whatnot. And I think I included a graphic for my jacket Jeanette where to put interfacing, and it's basically the same apart from, you know, this doesn't have slits. So you can just copy the placements of the interfacing if you choose to, you know, do the normal non-fusing stuff and like do a normal coat, then you can use this graphic right here. So that's that. Lovely. I love the color. Still am so in love with this. I hope it's gonna turn out really nice. And then for the color and stuff, I'm just gonna interface the whole thing. As I said, you can never go wrong with interfacing color pieces. I cut everything out and put interfacing on everything where I think it needed it. And now I have to start sewing, and I'm kind of not scared, but kind of don't want to start. It's really weird because this is such a big special project and it had so much prep work, and now I'm done with it and now I need to start sewing. It's kind of weird, I don't know. Yeah, but let's go. Okay, I have my back piece right here and then the insert for the box pleat, which is gonna go down here. And that's what I'm gonna sew on first. I was thinking a little bit about how I want to fix my pleats in place, and I came to the conclusion that I probably want to top stitch them down. So that's something that I am going to try out. I'm just gonna give this one here a little bit of a press because it's like kind of wrinkly. So let's start with putting the box pleat insert right here onto the back. So the smaller one of the, you know, rectangles that's put next to the back piece, and just sew right here. And on the other side of this box pleat insert, I'm gonna put the other back piece right here. Okay, we have the box pleat right here. We're not gonna iron anything because it will lay how it's supposed to lay. And now we can put the back pieces right on top of each other to close the back seam. So right here we're gonna have a centimeter going in and a centimeter going down. We have our stitching line because we have seam allowance on top here and seam allowance for our back piece right there. So we're gonna stitch right where my needle is. So seam allowance measured down and seam allowance measured in like this until here, from the neck all the way down here. And let's iron the seam allowance of the center back open. And I also want to iron the box pleat here in the back. So I have notches in here that need to meet, like basically the center notch needs to meet right there. And now if we pull this, this should technically lay right next to each other. Like this, and now carefully try to iron this in place. And I'm more like pressing, I'm not really like moving my iron. And this is where I'm probably gonna stitch the fold line down. I'm gonna stitch the center back seam down anyways, like right here next to the seam, which I have to do after I've finished the seam allowance here on the inside. So I'm gonna bind the edges and then I can top stitch them down until like here where the pleat starts, and then I'll have to start a new seam only for like only catching the pleat, not the insert right here down under, and go all the way to the hem to fix these in place. I'm gonna do that at 5mm distance, so I'll have to figure that one out. But before we do that, we can actually finish this up here. And for that, I'm going to cut into the seam allowance, like diagonally towards the stitching line. So I'm catching basically only the seam allowance of my pleat so that I can move the pleat seam allowance freely from the back seam, like this, you see? now it's like free. And I need this to also finish this seam here and then all of the other seams. But before that, we're gonna stitch at 1 centimeter. Honestly, I have so much purple bias binding from a different project. Not sure which project I bought this for, but I have like 4 rolls. There's another one somewhere. 3 rolls minimum, and that's gonna be more than enough, hopefully. And I think I'm just gonna use these ones. I guess that's fine. I mean, it's a 3rd color, but cute. I honestly don't really care. I need some bias binding. I have so much of this, I'm gonna use this. So okay, I bound all the edges. I think it looks pretty nice actually, and not too much in your face. I had like this fear that this might be too much, but it honestly looks pretty clean, so I'm happy about that. So now I can go ahead and top stitch. I will have to stop top stitching where the fold opens up. So right here, you can see that it opens up right here. So I'm gonna go probably like 5 millimeters further just to, you know, secure everything down, and then stop stitching right here. And with that, I can also try to stitch this fold more close. It's kind of like open now. I'll do that while on the sewing machine. I'm gonna stitch 5 millimeters on both sides of the seam right until this point here. And then I'm not gonna back tack. I'm just gonna like cut my threads and pull the threads down to the inside right here, so that once I start another seam without the box pleat, just these 2 here, I can also start without back tacking and then knot the threads on the inside. That way it's like a seamless finish. You basically don't see that there are 2 seams here, and that's the best way of like faking this here. So that's what I'm gonna do now. So I have my center back piece and then my side back piece right here. And what I will be doing is basically the same that I did for the 2 back pieces, just without the box pleat insert because it's already on the pattern right here. So my side back piece gets sewn together with my back piece right here in like one of the fold lines. This is going to be the fold line that's also going to lay that way. So that's where we sew this on, and then this is going to be like this, and it's going to look exactly the same as the box pleat right here. So let's sew this on and basically repeat all of the steps that we did for the box pleat here in the back. The only thing that I want to say is that I realized right here in the hem, there is the hem facing attached to it already. So we have to fold this upwards 4 centimeters. And if this is, you know, stitched down like this, you can't do this. So you have to stop stitching probably like 10 centimeters higher than the edge, because we have seam allowance, and then you don't want to go like all the way to the exact edge. And you're not gonna backstitch, you're just gonna do the same with just stopping, then pulling the thread through to the inside, because then we can seamlessly, you know, continue when the facing of the hem is ironed upwards and we have binding on it, because that's the thing why I don't just iron the facing upwards and fix it in place that way. You have to bind the edges as well, and you're only going to do that once the whole hem is sewn together in the seams and then ironed up as a whole. Obviously we don't have that yet because the coat is not sewn together yet, the corpus of the coat. So that's the thing, just stop 10 centimeters before the edge, and we're all going to do like the last of the top stitches at the very end once the hem is like done and finished. But that's just something that I realized after the fact. So let's actually put right sides together here in the fold line, sew this, and then we're gonna iron the fold, and then we're gonna sew the back dividing seam together, iron again, and like do the whole binding, and then, you know, the same thing as we did for the back here. Okay, so now that the full back is done right here, basically just mirrored the same thing that I did on the side that I showed you onto the other side, I'm going to add the pocket to the side front piece because now it's still laying flat and we can still reach everything. So you want to do that before sewing like the folds and stuff onto it. I already prepared the other side. This is what the pocket looks like on the inside, so we're also going to bind all the edges, make it look very pretty and finished and everything, and this is what it looks like from the outside. So I decided to do these parallel lines, and obviously you don't have to do that if you don't like it. So all we're gonna need for that is the flap pocket and the inner and outer pocket pieces. The first thing that I did was just fold this in half right at the fold line, iron it down, and then I just did top stitches every 5 millimeters. So like that, and now we need our side front piece right here. And what I like to do is just do some holes in the corners of my pocket, because then I can just use a pen, fabric pen, to, you know, have the position marked, which I can then connect and have like the perfect positioning of that pocket right here, just like that. And you want to do the same thing for your piece right here. So you want to just draw on the stitching line. Obviously here where the fold line is, there is no seam allowance here, so you're just going to skip over that and just put it on 3 of the 4 edges. And it's just easier if you do it on the other side of the flap as well. So just like that. And now we have to figure out where you want to like put your hands in. So the front dividing seam is right here. You can see the bust curve here. So you want to go in from the side seam, so from this side here. So that's where the fold line is going to sit. So it's going to end up like sitting right here this way. So we want to start sewing on the other side first, and you want to put it like right sides together and just meet the corners right here. And that's why I wanted you to put the lines, the stitching lines, on both sides, because you can now put a pin through. You see it on this side, you see it on that side, and you're gonna stick it through here as well. I just like to, you know, kind of like keep this in my ironing mat and do the same on the other side here, because now I have like a fixed surface and I can use pins in between to kind of like fix the stitching line in place here, like that. And now I can just top stitch right on top of that black line that I did before, from this corner to this corner. Next up, we're actually already gonna cut into the side front piece, so you wanna measure out the middle right here and just draw a random line somewhere in the middle. This distance does not matter, it just needs to be a distance, because you need seam allowance here. So you want to connect the edges to that center line right there on all 4 edges. So you want to go under here and connect the edge where you sewed towards, should be right the edge there. And the same for this corner here. This is what you want to cut. And then you just want to go towards the corners. If anything, go a little bit before, like don't cut any further than the black line. And now we can flip the pocket flap towards the inside and also inside here and here. Already looks pretty nice. So now we can just arrange everything here. Give it a press, that's always handy. You can also press this seam here so that it's like nice. And then you also want to arrange this side here, especially so that the corners just look nice and are nice. Because that, like right here, these 2 points are where you can see the best if you know, did a good job or not. And also I can see here that I did not cut towards the corner enough because it's kind of like wobbly. Like the fabric here kind of wobbles. It's better like this. And now you want to peel, let's do this side first, the fabric up to reveal this triangle here and, you know, the pocket flap seam allowance. And you just want to add pins to the fold line that we ironed in here, like that. And you want to sew from this corner here over to the other corner underneath that pin right here, and do the same to this side here. So now you want to check if everything lines up and looks nice, and so that you have like clean corners and everything. I'm just going to give it a press so that all of the black lines are removed. And now it's already time to add the pockets. So you have 2 pockets, one is bigger than the other, and that is because we have this flap right here, which has a certain width, and this is exactly the width these differ by, as you can see right here, because they're going to be placed left and right of this flap on the inside. So let's actually go there. Also, you want to iron this nicely to the side, that there is no like hole in between the flap fold and the seam allowance fold here. And what I like to do is add the stitching line to this here as well, because this is more than a centimeter obviously, but for my pocket I only have a centimeter seam allowance added on, so I need to know where exactly I need to match up my raw edge, and that's exactly here. So I'm just placing the pocket, the outer pocket, the bigger one, right on top here, like that. Should match up with like the corners here of the flap pocket. And I want to go from this side here. You can do the other side as well, but here I see the fold line, and that's where I want to stitch. So I'm just putting pins in right here, and now I want to go from this corner all the way to this corner. And now everything's beautifully aligned. You don't have a gap in between here. Technically, you could use a facing to hide the pink color. I don't know why I didn't, honestly. Usually you would put a facing right on top, like here, so that once it kind of gapes open, the pocket itself, you don't see the fabric of the pocket. So in this case, the pink fabric, which is obviously different to my fashion fabric. So you would put something on top here, and then you don't have this issue. Next up, we're gonna add the smaller one of the pockets, so the inner pocket, right to the other side here. And you're just gonna do that by putting right sides together of the pocket and the seam allowance of that side of the pocket flap, and you're also just gonna stitch like right next to that seam, more towards the raw edge, because otherwise you're gonna, you know, alter the look on the right side. So just next to that stitching line that is already there, and just fix the inner pocket to that seam allowance. Okay. Let's iron the inner pocket towards the left, or like towards the front, which is right here. And then also fold the outer pocket right on top. And as you can see, the pockets perfectly align. And you can just put a few pins in. You want to grab like the whole seam allowance here and go from the side and top stitch all of these layers together, not just the pockets. Same to this down here. And then, you know, you just go over to just the 2 layers of the pockets and sew them together as well. And then we're gonna bind the edges. You can choose to overlock them, obviously, that's whatever you want to do. I'm gonna bind the edges just as I did for, you know, all of the other visible raw edges. And to bind the edges, you need to cut away all of the bigger seam allowances, like all of these weird triangles and stuff. And then just for good measure, I'm also gonna cut down this seam allowance here. I'm not gonna bind this. This is gonna be covered up anyways. Nobody's gonna see this. but still it's gonna bulk up and you're gonna be able to see it on the right side. So let's sew around the pocket, and then I'm also off camera going to bind the edges here. And that's what the pocket looks like. Let's just iron it flat. And that's it from the right side. And you go in from this side right here, and the pocket is done. So now we can go on and just sew the remaining coat pieces, you know, meaning the front and the side front pieces, together just as I showed you for the back pieces, like the folds are the same. Obviously, make sure not to catch the pocket in the process. And I'll be back once the shell is done.